All right, so this is part two of the Meridian Way AAR since we got interrupted with about 7 or 8 runs in 30 minutes. But to catch everybody up, um, it's obviously available on the G Drive. Please go back and review this. When it all gets sent out via Fire Rescue 1, you'll have both components as well. But we had a sprinkler controlled fire. We showed video of that sprinkler controlled fire where the fire is actually about 15 feet up off the ground. It's a pretty well involved fire that is in a rack storage warehouse. And while in the video, the fire looks very small, it's small relative to the size of the space it's in, right? If we took that same fire and put it on a single family home, that's a very significant fire. So because it's just in a large space, it looks tiny, but it's actually a pretty well involved fire. When you see the sprinkler activation, it does not put the fire out. We talked a lot about that in part one about how a sprinkler system is a fire protection measure. It's there to protect the fire from getting bigger, from spreading, and it does exactly that. It does not extinguish the fire. We do that. We're the fire department. Our job is suppression and extinguishment. So just kind of showing those two aspects there. So we'll pick up with Chief Tully. He kind of talked about his initial things, and then we'll go through some of the positives and some of the concerns, and then we'll open this up for discussion. So that's where we're at. Chief Tully, take it away.
All right. What I was starting to allude to before I got so rudely interrupted by what we actually do, right? But no, that's great. That's what happens. So from my perspective, when Chief Manwaring and I pulled up, we had nothing showing on the Alpha side, and we went to drive down the Delta side because if you recall by that dispatch, it said the north west's corner. It actually ended up being probably more center or southwest corner, I would say, where we found it. When we drove down that Delta side, we got to about doors, I think it was 68 or 62, and you could see turbulent white smoke inside there, but it wasn't coming out of the door. And I think that's what I relayed in the size up. And I finished up a drive around just to see, to make sure. I couldn't tell if that's where the fire had started. So we drove around to see if there were any doors open on the other side, to see if maybe it was over there first and we were just seeing residual smoke. But when we got the other side, we could see in and it was completely clear on that side. So we went back and that was the right decision because that's where it ended up being. You'll hear I set up command on the Delta side. I said the fire was on the Delta side, and then I went ahead and assigned Alpha. That's a mistake on my part. I'll own that. And I'll try to do better with that. I don't know why. I think it's just because it's become common with the blue card aspect of assigning Alpha. The crazy part is I didn't do that on the Hopewell fire. I think I did it right and assigned Charlie. So that was just me just going straight to Alpha and assigning Alpha. And you can even hear my radio traffic there a little bit when I realized it was wrong, but I felt it was probably too deep into the incident to maybe change because everything was going all right. In regards to the sprinklers and the sprinklers being shut down, I think that's an important conversation. I'm sure it's a lot of people have a lot of different opinions. I don't know who was all here when Trevor got to share the video of the Walmart building that burned down and was sprinklered. But there are obviously a lot of other things that went to that made that situation happen. The sprinklers cause angst for an incident commander because in the back of our mind, we see those kind of buildings and those things occur. And it's a fine line of weighing what we're being told inside and knowing that could occur. So what I'd like to do is do a lot more research because big box, if you take their class, they say standard minimum, you let the sprinkler run for 90 minutes. I don't think I 100% agree with that either. I'd like to come up with some kind of common sense approach to it so that we can be better about it, since this is one of the biggest buildings that we face in our township. So kind of like Trevor said, there's not a lot of classes that you can find on it. The ones that we have are really related to sprinklers. And there's the big box blue card. But I'll tell you, I don't agree with 100% that they teach in that either. So I'd like to research it, try and figure out a better way that maybe we can come up with a common sense approach to that. And I even talked to Trevor after the first training and said, we need to look into as many classes that we can maybe go to on approaching these kind of fires with that in mind. So I know that occurs. You can look at the Home Depot fire out in California. There's plenty of big box store fires that occur. But that was my thought process. I even sent a whole crew to the riser just to make sure nothing would go wrong and nobody would leave that spot. But with that being said, could I have maybe shut it a little bit? Can you shut it halfway? Can you shut it 3/4 until you confirm? Those are all things that I'd like to look at and think about going forward to potentially be better for us. So other than that, I think it was great. I didn't so let's go back to that for a second. I didn't shut the sprinklers down. And if you listen to the radio traffic a little bit further, they found more fire. As a matter of fact, Jimmy Steinreich was at my car and I said, Jimmy was like ready to go in. And I was like, Jimmy, sounds like they got it mopped up. About 5 minutes later, he said, oh, we got more fire and your conditions are going to get worse outside and we're going to have to do extensive overhaul. That is what cued me to call a second alarm, thinking we were going to have to bring all those crates down and go through them by hand because that's what Chief Manwaring told me. We didn't end up really using a lot of the second alarm companies, but they were there in staging just in case. And we let them go as soon as we realized that we could handle it and it wasn't as bad once we were able to get those pallets down and we determined what we had to go through. So that's kind of my mindset and how the decisions were made from my perspective. Like I said, I will look into attacking these big box fires in a more, I don't know, positive way on every aspect, more common sense approach. That's all I have on that.
Awesome. Thanks, Chief. So yeah, so while there's big box fires out there, each one is different. You can look at TikTok and you'll have videos of like a Lowe's with a rack storage going up. There's another one that's another Walmart or a Target, but each one's a little bit different. There's just not that many like this out there to really reference and stuff. So it puts us in a minority, but it also puts us at a strategic advantage in the sense of like, hey, we could like, really do some research and do a deep dive into these things, kind of be cutting edge and industry leaders in this. So that's kind of the stuff that's on the radar with this. So again, this incident went very, very well. So we had clear and calm communication. First and foremost, that Chief Tully was able to identify, hey, it's this door, units coming in, come to this side, because unfortunately, like we showed you in part one, the geography of this building is already a very strategic disadvantage, right? One way in, one way out, limited access. There's a lot of things that just are against us going into this incident. And so we don't want to compound that. So clear and calm communication. Here's where the command post is. Here's exactly where I want you to go. Chief Tully's radio traffic had task, location, objective, which are the three things that you want. So it's not just, hey, come to the Delta side. It's, hey, come to the Delta side, stretch a line for fire attack. He's giving each engine company and each aerial that's coming in a job at, so what we call task, location, objective. Very effective deployment of resources. So one of the things that with the deployment of resources that we do that's different than a lot of our surrounding partners and mutual aid departments is we front load our run cards. So if you were to take us and compare them to, say, Cincinnati Fire, Cincinnati Fire's one alarm is the same across the board.
Westchester Township, medications, testing the 25 tones.
So
testing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
So what I mean by that is that they send what's called a still alarm, and then once working fire, they upgrade and add a couple extra units. We don't do that, right? We send everything front loaded because what happened in the back end a few years ago are task objectives, meaning, hey, what are all the positions we would have to cover at various types of businesses? So our commercial run card is different than a residential run card. Our mid-rise, high-rise is different than an apartment fire because there's different tasks that need to be done based on the construction and building type and occupancy class. So we have a lot of resources front-loaded in order to mitigate this incident quickly. So like Chief Tully said, hey, we didn't use a whole lot of the second alarm units. And that's exactly what's supposed to happen. We had them there as a strategic reserve, but we didn't really need them and we released them. That's exactly how that's supposed to work. So we have the appropriate hose lines, ladders up, and water supplies established. So again, we talked about how the apartment load was used on engine 74, and that was a real heads up play. Typically, before we had that line, right, we'd be looking at commercial packs, we'd be looking at 2.5 for really a mop up, no nothing fire. So Lieutenant Asbrock stretched the apartment load. And even though that line can be managed with 2 people, we still want to marry up those companies because even if you have to go around multiple turns, we don't know how much product's in there. The line still moves faster when you have more people on it. So we use the apartment load for that, and we use multiple apartment loads coming off of engine 74 and engine 72. And so that really contained it, right? While the fire was significant in size, it's quickly mitigated by the 15-16 smoothbore slug that we're throwing at it. So good job. Again, early notification for extra alarms in the special call units. So right when fire was out, they went ahead and notified for vent 21. Just as an information only, vent 21 will not fire up their fans until we have confirmed fire out. So if you call for ventilation inside of a building, and in this case, like we still had some smoldering embers and things that kind of flared up once we got to the outside, Cincinnati's not going to fire that fan up. It's in their policy because, like I showed you on the Walmart video, and if you didn't get to see it, you'll see it on part 1, or you can just YouTube Walmart distribution fire. It's pretty significant. They're not going to take the heat for that one. So when they add fresh air into a fire, they're not going to be the ones liable for that. So they do not fire the fan up until fire's out. And then we save millions of dollars of property with 0 injuries. So when I say millions of dollars of property, there's roughly $14 million of property inside that building every single day. So we sometimes I think we forget the salvage side, and sometimes I think we forget like why we're here, right? We're all here for life safety, and we understand that. But this is a multi-million-dollar building with over 14 or $15 million of product in there. If you think back to COVID and supply chain resources, we burned down a warehouse full of stuff in it. That is going to make a giant mark on supply chain issues nationwide because we are a nexus of logistics and supply chain stuff anyway. So the fact that we were able to save this with 0 injuries, that's actually a real tip of the hat to what makes a professional fire department. So well done. So one of the things as we go through some ideas and improvements, every time you guys submit a critique, I look at that and I try to classify it and like mesh it together, because if people say the same thing 3 times and that's a talking point, what I don't do is I don't dismiss any. So if you submitted a critique and wanted to bring something up, it'll be here. And then if when we're done going through these, if you have anything else to bring up, by all means, we'll open it up for a roundtable. So the first one that came up was the PPE and SCBA. So specifically, command officers not wearing their PPE, right? So number one, we have to be on SCBA when we're in an IDLH environment. That includes command officers. We've had this conversation before. However, it's a little bit vague, like what's IDLH, right? So cold smoke fire, hot smoky fire, no smoke fire, like what is IDLH, right? And there's an OSHA definition and a NIOSH definition. Neither one really apply to structural firefighting. They apply to hazmat. So the easiest way to say what's IDLH is smoke conditions, right? So if there's smoke, it's potentially IDLH. So I pulled our policy here. And so our policy talks about we might not use it when an atmosphere may be IDLH or might not be IDLH, but if we're engaged in firefighting operations, with the possible exception of a vegetation fire, we're in SCBA. So that includes car fires, dumpster fires, anytime we're engaged in firefighting operations outside of a grass fire. And then it talks about face pieces are donned and regulators attached before entering the smoke-filled IDLH environment. And we stop using an SCBA once it's approved by the IC. So it's not the safety officer responsibility. It's not the division supervisor's responsibility. It is the incident commander's responsibility to be like, hey, we're done with air packs. Most recently, this was kind of the Minuteman fire, right? We've got it completely ventilated. It's completely opened up. We're overhauling a garage. It's open to the outside. There's no smoke left. There's no fire left. Myself and the incident commander had a conversation. Hey, are you good if they're off air? He said, yeah, cool. We're off air, right? There's still risk with that, right? Because we're not inside, right? We're not, necessarily inside. We're pulling stuff out of a garage. We can use CO monitors, but CO is kind of the least of our worries here, right? There's benzenes and fluorines and all sorts of things that lead to cancer. Some departments go the opposite way. We're in SCBA nonstop. I think, kind of like Chief Tully alluded to, there has to be some common sense with this. But when we have a cold smoke fire, limited visibility, we must be in SCBA. So that was the biggest one that kind of came up and was seen throughout. And especially as company officers, as chief officers, we are examples, right? So, we can't expect our men and women to follow our lead and follow our commands if we're not willing to do the hard things there. And it is easy to get sucked in and forget about it, right? Like, oh, no, this will be fine. But we should be using all of our equipment that we're provided for personal protection. So then we talked about big box tactics. Chief Tully alluded to a lot of it. The best thing possible is to let that sprinkler run to slow down, right? So Blue Card talks a lot about big box tactics. And while Blue Card will tell you they're not a tactics class, all of a sudden tactics show up. So one thing that we talked about is from the subject matter expert from sprinklers. In that talks about 90 minutes of continuous flow. Again, what is their backing on that? He's a sprinkler rep, he's sprinkler industry. So I'm not trying to discredit what they're teaching because I think it's excellent stuff. But again, what are you basing that off of? What are the standards that you're going off of? What's the product that's burning? So all that kind of has to be looked at to kind of come up with a common sense policy. Maybe this is it. Maybe this policy, is a 90 minutes of continuous flow. Maybe that's what we do. But it's something to look at just because there's not a whole lot of incidents in this to draw from. It is difficult to saturate the product in rack storage. So you see that in the video, those sprinkler heads are running, but it doesn't really do anything to darken the fire down. What it does is keeps the fire contained. However, it's also saturating everything above it and around it, which was the issue with the collapse. So one of the problems with that is, as we're looking at collapse zones and everything else we talked about in part one, is we're really good about understanding collapse zones outside of a building being 1.5 times the height. But when we're looking at 30 feet of rack storage systems, we need to be outside of that as well. So having those division supervisors in place and safety officers in place to watch that. So that also brings up roof reports and tilt wall reports. So Blue Card, for all, and all the officers went through Blue Card, we spent a whole day on big box tactics of getting a roof report, get a roof report. Our mutual aid partners will not make entry until a roof report is done and until 2 companies are on scene to stretch a hose line, all right, for any big box building. So if you're if you're going into Springdale, Mason, any of those departments, Sharonville, and you're at a tilt-up building, they are not making entry until a roof report and 2 companies are on scene and there's an on-deck company. They have their reasons for that, right? They have their curriculum that they've done. However, I don't necessarily agree with it either. I'm not saying that it's a bad idea, but if we look at this building that we've been to numerous times, what is that roof report really going to give me, right? It's going to show me 4 HVAC units on the roof, and it's going to tell me that it's flat. Well, I knew that from the street because what Springdale does, which obviously they're a great department, but they're responding with 6 different agencies and they don't know who's on the truck. We are responding with our people in our town to our buildings, and we know everyone's capabilities. So we have just a difference of that, not necessarily an advantage or a disadvantage, it's just different. What is important to get though is a tilt wall report, because we want to make sure that none of the walls are leaning, which you can't really see that from the ground. You can see that from the air. So having a crew go up and get a tilt wall report is really, really important. I'm not sure if that exactly got done per se, but that's something to kind of look at as we start going into our big box tactics. So then water supply, it's appropriate to not lay in on these, right? Especially if you know you're going to be blocking units out, or hey, where's the fire? Okay. For years and years and years, we were told, for whatever reason, don't use a yard hydrant, don't use a yard hydrant, don't use a yard hydrant. And part of that was mainly because we say they're inspected, but they're not inspected by us, right? We're relying on the business to maintain that yard hydrant. However, we tell businesses to put these hydrants in for a reason. So we can absolutely use a yard hydrant. So it's a red hydrant, we can use it. The problem with laying in is that we don't know where we're going, right? So imagine what would have happened if we would have stopped on the alpha side and then pushed all the way down there, right? That's just a mess. So apparatus need to recon the area just like Chief Tully did. So everyone else level ones. And this is a true level one at this point, right? This is the typical stop, park, and brake and level one, because we don't know where we need to go. So when we're using a yard hydrant, it's great, but we have to supply the FDC. So when we're hitting a yard hydrant, it has X amount of pressure coming out of it. When we pump an FDC, we can boost the pressure of those yard hydrants if they're on a loop system. So by putting pressure into the FDC, we improve the pressure of those yard hydrants. Okay? You cannot pump a fire pump. So if this building is equipped with a fire pump, which many of our warehouses are, you cannot over pump that. Meaning the fire pump in the building may be set for 150 PSI at 500 gallons a minute. That is the max that pump will work. Okay, you can't put 200 PSI into it, or else, because it's rated for 150. It is just going to blow off the extra pressure. You can't put 700 gallons through it. It's regulated for 500. It'll only do its designed impact of how it's engineered. So just like if you think the fire pump that's on the fire truck, it's rated for 1,200 gallons a minute. You cannot make it do 1,500. All right, like that's the max it'll do. However, we still need to hit the FDC, because as the pressure is dropping, then the gallons per minute are dropping. So if the system is designed to run 150 PSI at 500 gallons a minute, but now it's at 90 PSI, it's not putting out the rated GPMs. That's how fires overrun sprinkler systems. That's if there's too much product in there, the sprinkler system can't keep up. So when we supply the FDC, we boost the pressure, and then we supply its max GPMs. We also boost the pressure in the system. Again, this is not something we do every single day, so it's a moment of pause for us to understand what we're doing on sprinkler controlled fires. That being said, when you're given a job, do that job. So you can hear a couple times on the radio, hey, a truck ran over the hose. What do you want me to do? Hey, do you still want me to hook up the FDC? The answer to those questions are yes, because as an incident commander, and I was standing next to Chief Tully when one of those came across the radio, he's got enough on his plate. As an incident commander, as a division boss, there's enough going on. He doesn't have time to come troubleshoot your problem. So when we talk about driver operators and really owning that position, this is what we mean by owning that position. You need to make a decision, right? I can't come down there and look at the hose and say, yep, it's good. You're just going to have to make a decision. So if you elect to take the hose out of service, okay, you made a decision. That is going to have a cascading effect that we need to get on the radio, tell the next in engine to lay into you so that we replace the hose that you took out. If you leave the hose in place and it blows, Okay, that's a thing. Again, we'll have to have an engine come in and supply it. There's risk to everything. All right. As far as should you hook up the FDC, the answer is yes. If we are at a sprinkler controlled fire, that FDC must be supplied, and it needs to be supplied off of a public hydrant. Whatever you need to do to get that job done, accomplish it. If you don't have the required resources, that's when you get on the radio and say, hey, I need some other help up here to be able to do that. But when you're given a job, do the job. So again, we need to get used to hooking up FDCs. We go to enough commercial building fires, and even I was guilty of this as a company officer. We didn't hook up when we were level oneing either. But maybe it's something that we need to look at is just getting used to hooking up those FDCs just as a muscle memory type building thing. We just talked about can't pump a fire pump, but we can boost pressures and loop systems, and we can augment that sprinkler system. So one thing that kind of comes up in all fires recently is what is this like recycle, rehab? What are we doing? Right. So if we start in the top left here, we're working, right? So you're assigned to a crew and you're doing your job. You're working, you're putting fires out, you're searching, you're doing all the cool things. When you get done with working, you recycle. Recycle means you're going out, you're getting a fresh bottle, a drink of water, and you stay within your division. We're not walking off to the truck. We're not walking off to go take our stuff off. That's not what we're doing. Bottled water, and stay within Alpha, Charlie, whoever you're assigned to. In the radio traffic and on scene, it got a little wonky as to who was assigned to who, because people were kind of like gravitating away. So we work, we recycle, we stay in our division, and then you're on deck to go back to work. Plan on doing this for 2 cycles. So work, recycle, come back to your division or stay in your division, go on deck, work again. After that is probably when you're going to go to rehab. Then rehab's where you go to the truck, take your stuff off, get more water, because we have other crews staying on deck to keep working. So that's just kind of how that cycle is supposed to be completed, just to kind of get everybody on the same page. It seems like it's still a little wonky or a little confusing. When it came to rotating crews, we attempted to perform a crew switch out on scene. But one thing that we all kind of forgot about, including me, was, hey, it's 6 a.m. We're doing a shift change. All these mutual aid companies switch between 6 and 7 as well. So, is it really practical to do a crew switch out? Should we not? I think it's a nice to have, not necessarily a need to have. But maybe we should start releasing mutual aid and using our companies more. And just as a general reminder, especially for the newer people, you're not always off at 6. So, it's nice to be off at 6, but you're not always off at 0600. So be prepared to make plans and have backup and contingencies when you're on shift. So when we talk about the command and ICS structure, Chief Tully said he used Alpha. Probably should have named it Delta just for ease of confusion as companies reporting like, hey, where's Alpha? Not on the Alpha side, so use Delta. But Alpha became quickly overloaded. So Chief Mainwaring had a lot going on. So what they do in those cases is they assign an aide. And what the aide's job is to take care of accountability and safety and tracking. That way, Alpha or Delta or whatever we call them can focus solely on the task, which Chief Mainwaring was doing a great job of. So he's watching the collapse zones, he's kind of directing operations, but it's really hard to do that. And remember, you got 3 companies stacked up behind you or who's going in and out. So when we have aides, that's what that is for. Considering using the attack group and search groups, which is our policy, as we're marrying companies, right? So it's not engine 74, tower 73, engine 72, ladder 75. It's fire attack group, search group. So now he's only got 2 people he really needs to talk to, the search group supervisor and the fire attack group supervisor, as that's going on. If this were to develop into a bigger thing, he would have been even more overwhelmed. The problem with that is blue card tactics and policy is difficult to mesh. We're working on it, but it's, as you can see, it's kind of a difficult thing to mesh here. There is no formal accountability with this because it's also very hard to keep accountability of 50 units. So division group supervisors maintain accountability for their assignments. So they know who they have in their areas. They know who's on the fire attack group. They know who's on the search group. You know who's on the RIC group. So they have overall accountability. And then the company officers have accountability of their people. And then in the car, you have strategic accountability. So that's one of the nice things about Blue Card is that it takes away an accountability officer who is going to lose everybody anyway and puts the onus back where things are happening at, especially for Maydays. So with that, turn over to Chief 72 real quick, and then we'll open it up for kind of roundtable discussion. Chief?
All right, thanks. Good work by all crews. Remain focused on a longer event. You know, warehouse fires aren't quick. I think we've kind of discussed this a little bit before, but sprinkler control warehouse fires are more like hazmat than they are like rushing, like we normally have to do. Gather your information, find some specialized equipment. I know we've talked about it before and we'll probably follow up, you know, can we train our people to run forklifts? How many of our people are trained to do that? Because unfortunately, it's easier for us to learn how to use a forklift than it is for the average worker to learn how to wear an air pack, because there's a whole lot of regulations to wear an air pack, very few to run a forklift. The fires are no fun and you will get wet on this ride. Like I was in the first fire in this building and it sucked and we were soaking wet. And I was a guy on the inside at the time fighting not to turn the sprinklers off because of what we have seen. So, you know, we get into the discussion of when is the time? So I will tell you, we are definitely looking for the input of the people inside. They have eyes and ears where it's at. We will combine that with information we have. What ability do we have to shut it down? What ability do we have to isolate it? How can we do that? Do we have crews available? How long has it been running? Like all those things are going to be taken into consideration in addition to the people inside. So if we're not turning them off right away, it's not that we want to see drowned rats. We're trying to put all this together to make sure we don't see what happened at the Walmart building. At the end of the day, I've talked to one of those guys and they said, hey, we're not allowed to say a word because every single one of us is being sued for that event. And none of us really need that. Alpha is a good command structure for single family and nothing larger. If you really look at how you have to divide out for span of control, we already know that it takes 2 companies to put any of our lines in service besides a pre-connected line. So that's 2 people on, or 2 companies on your primary line. Every time we pull a primary line, we've been taught pull a backup line. So there's 2 more companies. Now you've got, you know, at least a company apiece to, you know, back them up and go to on deck. So now you literally have just the attack group at 6 companies assigned to them to rotate people in and out. We also need to do some sort of search in that building. So that is why we do not use the Alpha for our commercial and multifamily. We use attack group and search group so that we can have division group supervisors that are not overwhelmed. Anybody that's ever been in there trying to hold all them passports, write things down, write every bit of what you got to do in a command car plus some, having that person overloaded does us no good. So that is why we already know we will overload them. So we do not use the traditional Alpha on our commercial and multifamily and high-rise fires. We only use the Alpha for our single family because typically we would not exceed the number of companies for that person. We have been hearing, and when we ask, you know, like, oh, we don't search in big box or warehouses. Like that is the Blue Card motto. We as Westchester Fire Department will search. I did some research and, you know, whenever you ask them, we're like, oh, well, we haven't had anybody die in a warehouse fire. Oh, no, actually, NFPA says we have about 2 a year. I don't know where those 2 are going to occur in the country, and I'm not going to be the guy that gets the phone call like the Pittsburgh fire chief and says, oh, we figured out there was somebody left in the building because he's knocking on the inside of the plywood where we've plywooded up this big old building. So we are going to search. Now, we are meeting probably late September, early October to try and sit down and figure out how do we incorporate some of that information from Blue Card into this? Is it we pull another hose line and they go in and use the hose line as an anchor? Do we continue to do our ropes? Like, how do we have to adjust to take some of that information in? But at the end of the day, if we're willing to put our people in the building to put the fire out, we had better be willing to put our people in the building to search for civilians that have no other chance of survival besides us. So that's all I have. Anybody have questions for me?
All right, thanks, Chief.
All right, thank you.
So yeah, speaking of the search stuff, there's a huge revolution going on in the fire service regarding search. If you follow anything on Facebook, following search culture and Justin McWilliams out of the Pacific Northwest, Clackamas Fire, a lot of good stuff. Actually, yesterday, David Rhodes, who is a retired battalion from Atlanta, he's the editor in chief of Fire Engineering. He put a big article out about search. Not searching big buildings, right? Again, Blue Card has its reasons of why they don't do it. Hey, that people should be able to evacuate. If you look at a Walmart, people leave, right? There's also this whole other sense of arsonists, right? So there are these people that are sometimes disgruntled that will go start a fire in someone's business. We search for more than just life, although that's the most important thing we're looking for. We should also be looking for other fires. And I remember a fire in District 3 probably about 10 years ago where they found a fire and then they found a second one upstairs because someone had lit a second fire. That happens. That is a real thing. So not only do you look or search for people, but you're searching for other fire, right? Why did this 500,000 square foot warehouse catch fire in the first place? We don't know. But like arson and nefarious reasons, especially in today's political climate, are sometimes things that need to be thinking of in the back of your mind. So we search and we will continue to search. And that creates a lot of angst with our mutual aid partners. But when they're not willing to go in, well, we will, because you do that. So open it up, kind of round table. If anyone has anything else they want to add, discuss, I know Chief Mainwaring's on, so he was running the Alpha Division. If he wants to kind of speak to a little bit of stuff and take it away.
Hey, Trevor.
Sure.
So as far as the investigation goes, did that yield any hard data, like how that particular pallet lit up halfway up a rack?
No. So as of now, and if Chief Hannafin has anything they want to add to that. Last discussion last week was they were still leaning towards just the heat of that product. The problem is we don't know how long that product had been sitting there, right? So did it get delivered overnight and someone flipped a cigarette in it from the last truck it was on? Did someone walk by and throw something in it? Did just the heat of it being up that high because it was a hot week, light it off? No real definitive stuff there. I know they're still kind of looking at it. That was the discussion last week.
Okay. And then just in regards to shutting the sprinklers down, I know what Brandon's saying about, trusting the input of your people that are actually inside the building. I think, and I thought myself and Chief Manwaring, we were kind of on the same page that we were in a good spot to shut down the sprinklers. And then they called for a third hose line to come in, which I don't think I'm alone on this, but I don't think we needed it in there with the 2 apartment loads we had. I mean, we got between 350 and 400 gallons a minute between those 2 hose lines. And the conditions that we had, it seemed excessive. That's all.
Chief Tully, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I just think that goes back. I think we'll have to look at it. The reason why we did that was kind of a group decision that we came up with that I felt comfortable turning them off. But like I said, yes, I hear your arguments. I hear I also hear the other side of that argument, and I'd like to maybe try and come up, like I said, with a common sense approach to these, and when we can shut it off and feel appropriate to do so. So,
I will
Yeah.
say the third hose line did come in handy, extinguishing the fire on the outside. So as the product came out, we kind of dumped it and it flared up. I mean, it was burning right there. So I think engine 111 and I had another crew go over and kind of rake through it and extinguish it. So, but yeah, I understand.
Yeah, I get maybe why there's apprehension or a little gun shy about shutting sprinklers off. You look at the Home Depot, you look at the Walmarts, you know, those kind of the empirical data that those give you, but you kind of have to, you got to look at them, I guess, objectively by themselves, because they're kind of comparing what we had on that fire to those other extremes. Those are kind of like apples and oranges. But I get, again, you don't want to, like Chief Hannafin said, you don't want to be that guy that gets that phone call or, you know, burns the whole goddamn thing down. So, but again, I think just trusting your people on the inside, if you got the right people in place, and yeah, just trust your people.
Hey, Trev,
Sure.
just a little bit more insight on a potential cause for that fire. What happens is when a shipment is received, a truck backs up to a door, and the forklift operator has to take the product off that truck one pallet at a time and drive it 30 doors to the rack where it belongs. And he's got to drive 30 doors back, get into the trailer, and back and forth, back and forth, back and forth 500 times or so until he unloads that trailer. So what lazy forklift truck operators do is they unload the entire contents of the tractor trailer on the warehouse floor, and they stack everything in a line, and they push all of it, the entire cargo, the length of the warehouse to the rack that it needs to go. Well, what happens is the nails and the bolts in the bottom of those pallets get really, really hot. And then they stack all that crap in the rack, and that stuff smolders there for a very long time before a fire finally breaks out. And we think that's what happened in this case. It's a known practice in the industry, and it's a big no-no in the industry, and they know they're not supposed to do that kind of stuff. So I think Brooks was looking to see if there's any video of that occurring.
Thank you, sir.
Yep.
Anybody else?
Yeah, Cox and 71s. It did get to me for my comments earlier before all the runs kicked off. As the review said, our truck the time on scene was 4 seconds before 74. I must have hit the button sooner than he did, because 74 and 71, we came nose to nose right in front of the building. So we arrived at the same time. So I was already discussing with my crew about catching the FTC, because we're going to be the second pumper on scene. So I motioned 74 on through to go to be the fire attack, since that was their district. And we were just going to go ahead and do the FTC because we had a plan. So I'll let this run go out.
Ready, but if you want a common person, 549 Delmar Drive, 5549 Delmar Drive, Country International Boulevard, UP 313.
So some of the thoughts I had, if you look at active 911, where the public hydrants and the FDC for this building was, the FDC was on the west side of the easternmost entrance, and the nearest public hydrant was the other on the east side of that entrance. So had we used that public plug to connect to the FDC through the truck, we would have shut off the easternmost driveway to the east side of the building. There was a public plug just a little bit, a couple hundred feet away, near the westernmost entrance. So I had discussed with Jesse on the way in, that we would pull in, wrap the FDC, reverse lane back to the public hydrant. And that way we stayed out of the way, we supplied it with a public hydrant, and we left both entrances open. And that was going fine until the public hydrant blew underground. So that was when the concern was of catching, dropping that hose, going back to the FDC and using the public hydrant on the other side, blocking off the easternmost entrance. And I talked to Jesse, he actually came to me about, as he was asking Chief Tully, should I connect this? He thought in his mind, why am I asking this? So he knew better, he knows better, we talked about it, so that should not happen again. As far as we were assigned rig, a couple things we did, or one thing I wish I would have done, doing rig in a large commercial building like this, it's not like doing it obviously in a single family residence. We were thinking heavy duty, search ropes, K-12, things like this. The one thing that I didn't put in my AAR report that I wish I would have grabbed, which was right on engine 74, right beside us, was the battery powered cutter and spreader. I was thinking, a little outside the box, but one of the big concerns was a collapse of a 20 to 30 foot high rack storage system that may have needed a cutter or a hydraulic spreader if we needed to get somebody out from under there. So I would have done that a little differently. The only other thing I wanted to mention was two things I noticed was the officer not using SCBA, and while we were standing outside, we heard a pass device going off inside right near the seat of the fire. Problem was everybody stood back and watched it or listened to it. I went up and said something to Chief Mainwaring about the SCBA. He was very courteous, he was very receptive, and he explained it, and he was thankful and glad that I asked. I mentioned it to him. The pass device, same thing. We made contact and it went off, it was reset by the time we got there. But just number one, don't be afraid to go to anybody on the fire scene if there's an unsafe act, and at least bring it up. Also, if there's a pass device going off, figure it out, do something about it. We know that 99 times out of 100, it is because somebody's not moving and it just goes off. But check into it. Never let these things keep going. And I believe my brain allows me, that's all I have.
Jim, if going to that pass device, if you listen to the radio traffic, there's a point where I actually say, whoever has their pass device going off, check it. Because I could hear it from the command post.
Yes, and I heard you say that as I was walking up to Chief Mainwaring to check on it, and it stopped. So yeah, we both said something about that. You're right.
Cool. Anybody else?
Chief Rhodes, Mainwaring.
Yeah.
So this is good stuff, and I appreciate all the work that you guys have done on this. I gotta say the crews inside did a really good job throughout the entire event. The SCBA thing, I take responsibility for that wholeheartedly. And like Jim said, he came up, shook me around a little bit, and reminded me of that, and I appreciated that. Otherwise, I think everybody did a great job, and I really don't have a lot to say. There was a lot of standing around. The on deck crews were receptive and ready to rock when we rotated people. And if I had one other thing that I could have done better personally is I could have rotated the crews a little better. I think maybe went a little long with some of the crews. It was hard to kind of judge that since there was some standing around and all that kind of stuff. But you're still on air. You're still in your gear. I dig it, and that's something that I think I will look for in the future. End of report. Thank you.
Dave, Dave, while you're on there, do you have anything to add as far as the sprinklers from the interior? Just
Yeah,
so I understand that different perspective, right?
Yeah, you know, and this is something that I've gone back and forth about, just like probably everybody who is inside or in the command role. This is going out, huh? I think. No?
Injury crash.
Entry accident, or entry accident, Hamilton Mason Road, Lindsay Farm Drive, Hamilton Mason Road, Lindsay Farm Drive. 1830.
Um, are we good?
Yep.
Okay, yeah, so I went through, you know, I thought about this just like everybody else did, right? And I've seen the videos, just like the ones that the Chief Road showed, the Walmarts, the Home Depots. That's a tough one. I know the policy and the thought process behind the 90 minutes, and it is sound. I think there's a lot of variables there, and I think we did the right thing by putting additional lines down in the event that something did pop off. And we did put people at the risers. I think that was the wise thing to do. Could it have been done a little faster? You know, maybe. You know, I think we have to evaluate that on a case by case basis, and we're in our infancy on this. So I don't hate on the fact that we kept those sprinklers running as long as we did. Though it does as instant commanders, we have to understand that does hamper interiors operations. So, you know, for example, we couldn't put Chief Schumann on a forklift with those running. It just wasn't going to work, and probably was dangerous too. So we had to wait a little bit. That is one of those that we're really going to have to look at, and go from there. I don't, but I understand the thought process with the incident commanders saying, no, we're going to let that run. And it is what it is.
Okay, thank you. I just want another perspective as well.
Yeah, no problem. Does anybody have any questions for me with my actions? Nope. All right. Well, thank you guys. You did a great job. End of report.
Anybody else have anything they want to bring up? No. Hearing none, thanks guys. Again, hats off to you on a unique fire. We'll see you here in about a week and a half to talk about Astor Park. I'll put out the recording. Thank you all. See ya.